Hello.
Hello, Miss Ruth. How are you?
I'm good. How are you?
Good, good. So happy to be doing this.
Me too. I'm super excited. I think it's so good to talk about women's issues in a way that is open and honest and things that we normally don't talk about in public.
I was going to say approachable, unapologetic. I think, yeah, all of those things.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
So, I want to talk about periods.
Let's do it.
When did you get your period?
Ooh, okay. So I think I was 12, 13. I was in that range. Yeah, it must have been, yeah, because it was in middle school, but it was 8th grade. I remember that. I remember that much. And this might be one of the most embarrassing stories of myself, not like actually getting my period, but how I reacted to it. So kind of just a little backstory. I'm an overthinker, planner as much as I can be. You can't plan for your period as much as you'd like. I have an older sister. I have an incredible mother. We had talked about periods, but not too in detail because I think they didn't want to scare me too early on. I think that information can be really jarring if you're not ready for it. But I had seen videos, the videos that you watch at school and stuff like that. And I felt pretty prepared as far as like my friends were getting their periods. And I was like, probably going to get it soon. Can't wait. Good. What?
Were you excited thinking about getting it?
I think I was excited. I think it was like a rite of passage almost. It's like becoming a woman, which that's not the like, oh, you have your period, you're a woman now. Yeah, check. But it felt like that to me. So long story short, this might be TMI. Hopefully we don't lose
such thing.
Okay, over this. But I wasn't fully aware of spotting, right? Like I thought that you just get your period, it's blood right away. It's like crimson tide, right? So the first probably 3 times I got my period because I was still developing my hormones and whatnot, and I was transitioning into, like all of the puberty and whatnot. My first couple of periods were just spotting, and it was very light and it was very, just normal. Now as a woman, I'm like, oh, okay, yeah, it makes sense that I was doing that. Never bled though. My bitch ass thought that I was dying. Went straight to death, like, because I didn't know what spotting was. Like, I knew what red was. Like, I was like, oh, if I'm bleeding, it's a period. But right. Brown, for some reason, for me was like
cancer.
Yeah. I'm done. I have a disease. I've never had sex before, but I have a disease. And it was like one of those things. So again, embarrassing. I hid my underwear or threw out my underwear from my mom because I didn't want to tell my mom I was dying. Which is so ridiculous when I think about it, because I'm like, Madison, like if you're dying, you genuinely thought you were dying. Yeah. Probably should have opened up to your mom. But me being like, I can't hurt my mother like that was like, I'll just die in peace. She'll figure it out. And I did not tell her. And I was just like, I'm either dying from a disease, something. So I just did that. Long story short, I finally bled probably like a month or 2 after having, the first symptoms of it. And then I was like, oh, I got my period. And then my mom was like, oh, honey, like we talked about it and it was great. And she was so easy and helped me out and got me situated. And I was like crying and I'm like, I've been having this symptom. And she was like, oh, that's a part of your period. And I was like, I thought I was dying. She of course felt so upset. She was like, I'm sorry you felt that way. But long story short, women that haven't gotten their period yet, women that have, hopefully you've had hilarious experiences like this as well. So I'm glad I'm at that age. It felt really momentous and I'm glad. I know that I did beg my mom not to tell my dad. And then not even 4 hours later, my dad was like, hi, honey. And I was like, I knew he knew. So besides that though, I'm very thankful. It's laughing. I can laugh about it now that I know how ridiculous I was being. But I'm so thankful that my mom was open and was able to talk to me about it. But now that I've been through that, I think I'm going to give my daughters or nieces or what have you all the info up front so that there's no shock factor. But I want to hear about your first one.
Yeah, no, I was listening to your story. It's funny because like even for me being in school and getting like the lessons and sex ed, I also thought that it was going to come like a gushing wave and it was going to be all at once. Like, you don't like, if as long as you get the tampon in at that time,
plug her up, like.
Yeah. But I was also around 12 years old. I was actually here in LA visiting my dad and my stepmom, and which kind of sucked because my mom wasn't here. And I remember waking up and I was sleeping on their couch, and I did not have spotting. I did not. I started with like not the full gushing, but like a fair amount of blood. Yeah. And I remember my stepmom explaining to me what it was. And the weirdest thing she said to me was, I'm 12 years old. She's like, well, now you can't have sex without protection. I'm like,
That's a great first talk.
Thanks and goodbye.
Yeah. Oh my goodness.
But I still remember that to this day. I remember the feeling. I remember having a stomach ache the night before. I remember waking up on the couch and like feeling so insecure about it. And I think the main thing that stands out to me about this whole thing is I'm 35 now. I got it when I was 12.
Yeah.
You're
25.
20.
Yeah.
But still, like a good amount of time between that experience, and it's still so fresh in our memory. And I think one thing that I'll take away from this is when I get to that point of having a child and her getting to that age, like making sure they're prepared, like you said, but also making sure it's memorable. I would love that there to be kind of like not maybe a celebration, but kind of a momentous moment where it's just like, yeah.
I totally agree, because I think it should be celebrated. I don't think it doesn't have to be as momentous, or like, I do think it's momentous, but I don't think it needs to be as so much pressure of like, you're a woman now, you know, there's consequences now, like, that's right, you know, that whole thing. But I do think there has to be some celebration with it to a certain extent, because I think there's so much shame around it, unfortunately.
Absolutely.
And I think women still, like, I remember so vividly still, even like later high school years, even college years, it's like you're at school and you're like getting your pad out of your, or like getting a tampon, and you like sneak it, and then you like walk away and you're like, why am I hiding a tampon? Like, everyone knows.
I genuinely still feel a little like insecure about checking out at the grocery store with them, especially if like it's a male like checker outer. Like, I feel so uncomfortable. I feel uncomfortable. I don't feel like completely copacetic about it.
Yes, it's not like ruins your day, but you definitely feel like a little tension. Yeah, and I think if you celebrated, you know, young women, you know, if it was something, and even if family was involved, like, it doesn't need to be like a quinceañera, right? But like, you know, do you, of course. But I think like, especially with my dad too, like, still I'm 25 years old, my sister's 32, and we can't even say like period without my dad being like, ah! And that's ridiculous to me, and that's a whole other issue that I take up with him all the time. I think like if he was more involved, and I think it was not necessarily, like I said, like crazy party or anything, but it was like, we support you, this is something new in your life, you know, any questions, any concerns, but also don't feel like this. I know a couple of women that cried, some of my friends that cried when they found out, because they were like, it felt like their life was over. They felt like limited, you know, it's like, oh, I can't swim anymore, I can't do, like, there's all of these like rules and regulations. And
well, it's interesting, I guess, like even getting into that, like everybody experiences their period very differently. Like everybody has different kind of like hormones leading up to it, and like pains. And the other day, my last period, I've never had like intense cramping, and if I've ever like had a friend that's even reached out to me and like, oh, I can't get together because like I'm like having really bad cramps, I'm like, oh God.
I'm the same. I've like, it's very rare for me to cramp.
So the other morning, while I was on my period, I woke up at like 2 a.m. in extreme pain, like couldn't move pain. And I usually work out with a girlfriend in the morning, and I had to text her and be like, I've been up since 2 with like period cramps. And I like, in my mind, I'm thinking like, she's probably like, this bitch does not want to work out. And I'm like, it's real.
It is real, but I've been there. I shamefully will admit, like, I've been there where I've been like, bitch, is it really that bad? You know? And I think it's because my own experience colors that, right? Like you were saying, I haven't had that many painful experiences, but I texted you, I know we talked about this, I had a crazy last period too, like bent over, like cramps, and I never get that. And you know, that just shows how much it varies, and you know, not only per person, it varies, but person to person, and health conditions within that, PCOS and things like that, that are going to limit, you know, or exaggerate your symptoms sometimes. So that's where I think any kind of shame or fear, it doesn't need to be like all sunshine and rainbows, but I think there is a healthy, like if we put more excitement in just kind of like the rite of passage.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. Not to feel like ashamed or dirty or like unclean by it, or like maybe get to a point where it doesn't feel shameful to like walk to the grocery store and get your tampons, or like all of that.
Yeah, and also, even like, go ahead.
No, I was gonna say, I will say that I was talking to this woman that works in a reproductive doctor's office, and that she told me that if you have an extreme change in the way your period feels, that could be a problem like fertility wise, and you should get it checked out. So that is like definitely a note that if anybody does have an extreme change, definitely don't ignore it, check into it. And
and I think that's a great or not like a just point to make in general. I think menstrual health is so important. I've learned more about that in the last couple of years. I've learned a lot from just reading books on feminine health in general. And I think I was so terrified of gynecologists in general. You know, it's like you hear that pap smears are so painful, which they are, but you know, you hear all of these horror stories, right? And I think it should be more of that, like more encouraging, like use our education and our resources. Don't be afraid to ask if you feel like something's wrong with you, like menstrual wise, hormone wise. I know I've dealt with like hormonal issues in the last couple of years going off birth control and just being like, holy shit, what am I going through? You know, and it's like, I know I'm not the only one. And I think just giving yourself the permission to ask those questions and not feel shameful, like you're saying, because take care of yourself if anything's going on. Absolutely.
No, this is great. And I think just to kind of wrap up, I think it's just, if anybody's out there and they haven't started their period, just know like any experience you have is going to be memorable. Make sure to take the moment. You will remember this for the rest of your life, but also feel good about it and like recognize you are a woman, but there's going to be a lot more challenges that come along with that. Don't be afraid to talk about it. Don't be afraid to ask for help if things don't seem right, and just reach out.
Yeah, absolutely. We're all women. We're in it together, you know, and I think that's great. I love that.
Hey everybody, I'm Adam Khalil. Thank you so much for listening to this video. I definitely want you to subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more content like this. But if this content had any value to you, click the like button as well.